Escape from Sobibor, a survivor's tale of the 1943 uprising. I remember the hunger, the fear, and the smell most of all. Every day in Sobibor extermination camp was a descent into nightmare. I arrived in the spring of 1943 with my family on a packed cattle train. Within an hour of arrival, my wife and our two little girls were taken from me under the pretense of a shower. I never saw them again. I soon learned the awful truth. Sobibor was not a labor camp or a transit camp. It was a factory of death. Nearly every newcomer was sent straight to the gas chambers. Only a few of us were selected for forced labor, kept alive to serve the Nazis' murderous operation. I was one of those lucky few. We lived on borrowed time, clinging to life by making ourselves useful to the SS. My name is Jacob Kleinman. At the time of the uprising at Sobibor, I was 32 years old, but I felt decades older. My world had been stolen from me, piece by piece, long before I ever set foot in that terrible place. I grew up in a quiet Jewish neighborhood in Warsaw, Poland, in a modest apartment where laughter echoed through our small kitchen each Shabbat evening. My father was a humble tailor whose hands, rough from countless hours of stitching, had lovingly crafted our family's simple but comfortable life. My mother, gentle yet fiercely protective, filled our home with warmth and the scent of freshly baked challah. I was their only child, their pride and joy. Before the war, I worked as a school teacher. I loved literature and poetry and believed deeply in the power of words to enlighten and inspire. Teaching was my way of giving something valuable back to the world. In my classroom, I met my beloved Leah, who taught music in the same school. We married young and built dreams together, envisioning a home filled with children, laughter, and music. Our daughters, Miriam and Esther, brought unimaginable joy into our lives. Miriam was 5 and Esther just 3 years old when the Nazis invaded Poland in 1939. Overnight, our happy existence was shattered. We were forced into the Warsaw Ghetto, a nightmare of starvation, disease, and constant fear. Still, I tried desperately to shield my family from despair. I scavenged for food, taught my daughters songs and stories to distract them, and held Leah close each night, whispering hollow promises that everything would somehow be all right. In early 1943, our fragile safety was destroyed completely. One cold morning, Nazi soldiers stormed our building. We were dragged from our beds, marched through the snow-covered streets to the railway station, and packed tightly into a cattle train. I remember Leah holding the girls close, her eyes meeting mine in silent, desperate reassurance. We arrived at Sobibor after 2 harrowing days, confused and terrified. Within minutes, an SS officer with eyes colder than ice separated me from my family. I screamed for Leah, fought to reach them, but a rifle butt struck me down. Through a haze of pain, I watched as they were herded toward a place disguised as showers. That was the last time I ever saw them. In Sobibor, every shred of humanity was stripped away, replaced by numb resignation. But the memory of Leah and our daughters became the only thing that kept me breathing, kept me alive. Each day, as I sorted belongings stripped from other doomed families, I searched for fragments of my own, clinging desperately to any small reminder of the life I once had. It was in this place of unimaginable cruelty that I found myself standing on the edge of freedom or death. My old life, filled with simple dreams and quiet happiness, was forever gone. But if this was to be my final act, I was determined it would honor my family's memory. As I stood at the fence, ready to run into the unknown, I whispered softly into the darkening sky, "Leah, Miriam, Esther, this is for you." By summer 1943, I had become a slave in Sobibor's Camp 2, sorting the clothing and possessions stripped from new arrivals. Day after day, I watched frightened men, women and children file into the disrobing yard, ordered to undress and hand over their valuables. Guards barked at them to hurry. Many of the victims still believed they were just showering before work or resettlement. The Nazis cruelly maintained this illusion by having prisoners cut the women's hair for hygiene and even letting some send postcards home saying all was well. But I and the other inmates knew the truth. We called the fenced path that led from Camp 2 to the gas chambers Himmelfahrtstrasse, the road to heaven. With bitter irony, I saw elderly people and children who couldn't walk to the gas chambers shot in ditches on the spot by Ukrainian guards. Within Camp 3, beyond our sight, lay the gas chambers and burning pits. At night, the sky glowed red from the open-air cremations of thousands of bodies, and the stench of burning flesh hung over the camp like a poison cloud. The horror was inescapable. Even the air we breathed was thick with death. Life in Sobibor was a ceaseless routine of terror and grief. We were housed in overcrowded barracks in Camp Reform, the labor camp section, under constant guard. Each morning at dawn, an SS officer or a capo, a prisoner foreman, would yank open the barrack door and drive us out for roll call, screaming at us to line up faster. The guards in the towers trained their machine guns on us as we stood shivering in our thin striped uniforms. Anyone who stumbled or appeared ill might be pulled out and shot without hesitation. I remember one morning a man 2 rows over from me didn't stand up straight. An SS whipped him savagely, then shot him in the head as a lesson to us all. Cruelty was random and constant. We worked 10, 12, 14 hours a day, sorting clothes, cleaning barracks, digging ditches, chopping wood, any task the Nazis demanded. We survived on watery soup and crusts of bread. At night, I collapsed onto a bunk, heartbroken and hollow, often hearing distant screams or gunshots echo in the dark. Despair settled over us like the dusk. Yet even in this living hell, whispers of resistance began to spread. In April 1943, we heard rumors of Jews fighting back in the Warsaw Ghetto. Incredibly, they had held off the Germans for weeks. And later we learned that at Treblinka, another death camp, prisoners had revolted in August and hundreds briefly escaped. These stories were like tiny embers of hope glowing in the ashes of our world. If others dared to resist, I thought, maybe we can too. Still, Sobibor seemed impenetrable. High barbed wire fences, armed watchtowers, and a minefield encircling us to ensure no one could flee alive. Escape attempts before had ended in death for those who tried and brutal retaliation on those left behind. Many lost hope entirely. As the summer went on, transports of new victims slowed down and ominous rumors began circulating. The camp might soon be shut down. At first, that sounded like it could mean freedom, but we quickly realized what it truly meant. We knew what the Nazis had done when they liquidated Belzec, another extermination camp, earlier that year. They murdered the last remaining Jews who had been forced to work there. If Sobibor was to be closed, we, the remaining prisoners, would all be killed to erase the evidence. This grim prospect settled over us, and a strange resolve began to take root. If we were going to die anyway, better to die fighting. It was around this time in late September 1943 that new prisoners arrived who would change everything. A train came from Minsk carrying Jewish Soviet prisoners of war. Among them was a tall, quiet Red Army lieutenant named Alexander Sasha Pechersky. Sasha was different from most of us. He was a soldier, a man who had fought the Nazis on the battlefield. He carried himself with a calm confidence even in Sobibor. The existing underground in the camp, a small secret group led by a Polish Jew, Leon Felhendler, immediately recognized Sasha's leadership qualities. Within days, Leon and Sasha were meeting in whispers behind the barracks after curfew. My friend David and I noticed them huddled together, gesturing over crude sketches of the camp drawn in the dirt. Hope stirred in my chest. Something was being planned. One chilly evening, Leon Felhendler approached a few of us trusted prisoners, eyes shining with a determination I hadn't seen before. In a low voice, he revealed that Sasha Pechersky had devised a bold escape plan. My heart pounded as I listened. The plan was as simple as it was perilous. We would kill the SS officers and guards quietly, one by one, and then, during the usual evening roll call, all 600 prisoners in Sobibor would assemble and march out of the camp in formation. The idea was to fool the Ukrainian guards in the watchtowers into thinking we were just being transferred by the SS, so they wouldn't immediately open fire. By the time the guards realized what was happening, we would be at the gates, armed with the guns taken from dead SS men, and we would break out through the main entrance. It was audacious, nearly unbelievable, but it was the only chance we had. Leon's voice trembled with urgency as he asked me and David, "Will you help us?" I glanced at David. I saw the answer in his eyes, yes. David and I both nodded. Count us in. In that moment, fear was overcome by a surge of purpose. After all the months of helpless suffering, we now had a mission, either freedom or death. Over the next 2 weeks, we prepared in the shadows. Secrecy was vital. Only a small circle of prisoners knew the full plan. They carefully recruited others, one by one, swearing them to silence. We identified which SS officers and guards had to be eliminated and assigned prisoners to each target. I was a sorter in the storage warehouse, so I was chosen to help lure SS Sergeant Joseph Wolf into a trap there. My friend David worked as a carpenter, and he would assist another prisoner in ambushing Siegfried Gracious, the SS man in charge of the Ukrainian guards. Axes and knives were to be our weapons, tools we used daily that wouldn't arouse suspicion. A few conspirators even managed to craft homemade knives and steal a handgun from a drunk guard. But we had almost no firearms. Timing would be everything. The attacks had to happen in quick succession, just minutes apart, so that the SS couldn't warn each other or mount a defense. October 14th, 1943 was chosen as the day. We picked that date because the camp commandant and several high-ranking officers were scheduled to be away on business in Lublin, meaning fewer SS to fight. We would strike at 4 p.m. when many of the SS staff would be scattered around the camp, preparing for evening roll call. The evening before the planned escape, I could hardly sleep. I lay on the rough plank of my bunk, staring into the darkness. Around me, dozens of other men breathed shallowly, some asleep, many like me awake with anxiety. I turned my head and could just make out David's silhouette on the bunk beside mine. Sensing my eyes, he whispered, "Tomorrow." I reached through the darkness and squeezed his hand. No other words were needed. Tomorrow we would risk everything. I closed my eyes and pictured my wife's face and our daughter's smiles. I'm doing this for you, I thought. If I died the next day, at least it would be on my own terms, not in a gas chamber. October 14th, 1943 dawned cold and gray. The day unfolded as usual at first, which was exactly what we needed. We went about our forced labor, each of us trying to act normal, despite the terror and excitement churning inside. I spent the morning hauling piles of sorted clothing and shoes, my mind racing over the plan again and again. 4 p.m. was our 0 hour. Every glance at a guard, every barked order felt charged with potential doom. Did they suspect anything? One wrong word, one nervous look could betray us all. At noon, an SS officer, Untersturmführer Johann Niemann, the deputy commandant of Sobibor, strolled through Camp 1. He was in a jovial mood. Rumor was he was leaving for a hunting trip soon. As he passed, I kept my eyes down, hiding the hate boiling inside me. Niemann had overseen so much death here. By tonight, I thought, you will pay for it. As the afternoon shadows grew longer, we conspirators took our positions. The plan was in motion. At around 4 p.m., it began. In the tailor shop of Camp Befreund, a prisoner politely called out to Deputy Commandant Niemann, telling him a new uniform was ready for a fitting. Niemann took the bait. He stepped inside the cramped tailor barrack, where behind the door 2 of our bravest waited. My comrade Chaim stood there, heart thundering in his chest, gripping an axe. With one powerful swing, Chaim buried the axe in the back of Niemann's neck. The deputy commandant collapsed without a sound. His white linen riding jacket splattered red. At that same moment, across the camp in the sorting warehouse, I was playing my part. SS Sergeant Joseph Wolf oversaw the sorting detail and often visited the warehouse to see if any valuables had been found in the prisoner's luggage. Earlier in the day, I had set aside an elegant leather coat from a recent transport, knowing it might tempt him. Now I approached Wolf outside the storage room. "Herr Untersturmführer," I called out with feigned enthusiasm, "we have found a very fine coat that might fit you. Perhaps you'd like to try it on?" Wolf, vain and materialistic, raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Show me," he said. My mouth was dry as dust as I led him into the dim warehouse piled high with shoes, clothing, and suitcases of the dead. My fellow prisoner Yitzhak waited inside, hidden behind a shelf clutching a heavy iron bar. As Wolf shrugged off his uniform jacket to try the coat, I saw Yitzhak step silently from the shadows behind him. In one swift, savage motion, Yitzhak brought the iron bar down on Wolf's skull. There was a sickening crack. Wolf crumpled to the floor, the fancy coat still draped over one arm. I stood frozen for a half second, staring at what we had done. The SS sergeant's body twitched at my feet, blood pooling under his head. We had actually done it. We killed one of our oppressors. My stupor broke when Yitzhak grabbed Wolf's sidearm from his holster. "Come, we must hide him," Yitzhak urged. Together we dragged Wolf's body behind a stack of burlap sacks filled with clothes. My hands were trembling, my stomach in knots, but inside I felt a fierce flare of grim satisfaction. All over the camp, similar ambushes were unfolding in those fateful minutes. In the cobbler's shack, in the carpenter's workshop, in the guard post, prisoners struck with improvised weapons. One after another, unsuspecting SS men were stabbed, bludgeoned, or axed to death. A Nazi inspecting a new pair of boots was stabbed in the neck. The SS officer who commanded the Ukrainian guards, Graichus, was slain by 2 prisoners while he toyed with a piece of jewelry. About a dozen Nazi SS personnel fell in roughly an hour through these ruses and attacks. We grabbed their rifles, pistols, and grenades if they carried any. I remember seeing Sasha Pechersky emerge from the mechanic's workshop, a bloody axe in one hand and an officer's pistol in the other, his face set in determination. He caught my eye and gave a tight nod, the signal that phase 1 of our plan was a success. In that moment, we prisoners had taken the upper hand inside Sobibor, if only briefly. To delay discovery, a prisoner cut the telephone and telegraph wires leading out of the camp shortly after the attack began. By 4:30 p.m., with the communications down, we hoped no alarm had yet gone out beyond Sobibor's fences. The next critical step was to assemble the prisoners for the evening roll call at 5 p.m., as if everything were normal. We knew we had to act fast. Through hushed whispers and covert signals, the call went out. Get to the assembly yard and be ready to run. Capos quietly guided work details to drop what they were doing and head to the main yard by the front gate. I wiped the blood from my hands on a rag and slipped out of the warehouse, joining the stream of prisoners converging at the parade ground. I saw Leon Felhendler there, motioning people into rows, trying to maintain calm. The Ukrainian guard snipers in the watchtowers above still looked on unsuspectingly. From their vantage, nothing seemed amiss. Groups of prisoners lining up like usual. My heart was thudding so loudly I was sure the guards would hear it. David appeared at my side, his face smeared with dirt and sweat. He whispered, "It's done. Graichus is dead. We got his rifle." I nodded, relief and adrenaline surging through me. Hidden under my shirt, I had Wolf's pistol. David had a stolen rifle strapped under his jacket. We were not unarmed anymore. Minutes ticked by like hours as nearly all 600 prisoners gathered in the yard. We waited for the SS officers to come for roll call and lead us out as planned, but no one came. Niemann should have been there to count us, but he lay dead in the tailor shop. The other SS who remained alive must have discovered the bodies by now. I scanned the perimeter and caught sight of SS Oberscharführer Karl Frenzel, one of the cruelest overseers in Sobibor, running along the camp fence with a carbine in hand, shouting an alarm. The element of surprise was wearing off. A ripple of unease passed through the assembled prisoners as murmurs spread. "Where are the Germans? Is it time?" Leon climbed up on the wooden platform by the flagpole and raised his hands, urging calm. But before he could speak, an SS gunshot rang out, then another. Chaos erupted. Frenzel and a few surviving guards appeared and opened fire on us. Bullets tore into the crowd. I saw the man in front of me crumple, a red blossom spreading on his chest. Screams filled the air. There was no more pretense, no more need for quiet. It was do or die now. "Run!" someone yelled. In the same instant, Sasha Pechersky's voice rose above the din. In Russian, he bellowed, "Forward, comrades! For Stalin! Death to the fascists!" I didn't understand all of it, but I knew a rallying cry when I heard it. He then shouted in broken Polish, "Whoever survives, tell the world what happened here." Those words hit me like electricity. This was more than just our escape. This was about the truth, about defying the Nazi lies. I grabbed David's arm. Together, we bolted toward the barbed wire fence on the camp's flank. Around us, pandemonium. Prisoners running in every direction, some charging the main gate, others climbing the fences. I heard the staccato of machine gun fire from the guard towers. Prisoners fell left and right, mowed down as they ran for freedom. A group of men near the gate went down in a hail of bullets before they ever got close. To my left, a landmine exploded with a deafening boom, tossing bodies and dirt into the air. Some poor souls had hit the minefield outside the wire. The blast knocked me to the ground, ears ringing. Dazed, I scrambled up and saw a section of the fence ahead where the barbed wire was partly cut and sagging, likely prepared by some prisoners moments before. "There!" I shouted to David. We sprinted for that spot along with a crush of others. Another prisoner, Moshe, reached the gap first and began slashing at the remaining wires with a stolen axe, creating a wider opening. Just then a shot caught him and Moshe collapsed against the fence. David and I rushed forward. David pushed the dying Moshe aside and tore at the loosened wire, blood from Moshe's body smearing onto David's hands. One more strong pull and the wire gave way enough for a person to squeeze through. "Go, go!" David urged, waving others through the gap. I slapped David's shoulder. "Your turn, I'll cover you." I raised Wolf's pistol with shaking hands and fired blindly towards the nearest guard tower. Click. It was empty. I realized I had no ammo. I must not have chambered the rounds properly in panic, but just the sight of a gun in my hand made a few guards duck. David shoved two younger boys through the fence first, then he climbed through. I was right behind him. My shirt caught on a barb and tore as I forced my body through the jagged opening. On the other side of the fence, open field and forest beyond, freedom and danger. We were outside Sobibor's perimeter now, but far from safe. A flat expanse about 200 meters wide separated the camp from the tree line, and in that field lay scattered mines. The SS had planted them months earlier to stop escapees. I dashed after David across the field, zigzagging as fast as my exhausted legs would carry me. All around, prisoners were running, dropping, screaming. Gunfire from behind us cracked incessantly. I heard bullets whistle by my ear. Ahead, I saw one of the boys who escaped just before us suddenly fly into the air with a blinding blast. He'd stepped on a mine. The explosion showered us with soil and shrapnel. I felt a hot sting as a fragment grazed my calf, but adrenaline numbed the pain. David was a few strides ahead of me. "Keep going," I rasped, though my throat was dry and raw. We pushed forward, weaving towards spots where the ground had already erupted, hoping the mines there had blown and cleared a path. The pine trees loomed closer. Just then, a sharp crack rang out, and I saw David stumble. He lurched forward a few steps, then fell hard onto the grass. I skidded to a halt and rushed to him. A bullet had caught him in the back. He looked up at me, eyes wide in shock and pain. Blood bubbled on his lips as he tried to speak. "Go!" he managed in a wet whisper. Tears blurred my vision. "No, David, get up!" I pleaded, hooking my arms under his to drag him. He was coughing blood, his body limp. Another bullet kicked up dust near us, reminding me that staying here meant death. David gripped my arm weakly, and in his eyes I saw him begging me not to waste my chance. I had to leave him. Choking back a sob, I let go of my friend and ran. David's fate joined the countless tragedies of Sobibor, one more name I would forever carry in my heart. I sprinted the last stretch to the tree line. Branches and thorns scratched my face and arms as I hurled myself into the relative cover of the forest. A few others crashed in beside me, gasping, bleeding survivors of the gauntlet. Behind us, the camp alarm siren was wailing and sporadic gunfire continued. But I didn't dare stop. I plunged deeper into the woods, branches whipping at my skin until the sounds of massacre grew faint. Only then did I collapse behind a large oak, chest heaving, each breath a mix of triumph and grief. I was out. I was alive. For now. That night, about 50 of us huddled in the forest clearing, survivors from the camp. We were free but terrified, deep behind enemy lines, with no food, no shelter, and the Nazis surely hunting us. Sasha Pechersky was among the group I found. His face, illuminated by the moonlight filtering through the pines, was grim. We knew the SS would comb the area by dawn with dogs and guns. So under Sasha's guidance, we split into smaller groups. Larger groups would be easier to catch. Small ones had a better chance. Sasha planned to lead the Soviet POWs eastward toward the front, in the distant Soviet lines. Many of the Polish Jews, not knowing the land or language well, decided to break off westward or hide locally. I had a wrenching choice to make: go with Sasha or try my luck separately. In the end, I stayed with a couple of men from my hometown. We decided to head west towards a nearby Polish village where I once had distant acquaintances. Before our band parted ways with Sasha's, he clasped my hand firmly. In that low, steady voice that had given us courage, he reminded me, "Remember to tell the world. Tell everyone what we did, what they did to us." I nodded, emotion choking me. "I will," I promised silently. "I won't let our friends die in vain." Survival in the weeks that followed was a new kind of nightmare, but at least it was freedom. By day, we hid in the forests or barns. By night, we crept through fields, moving farm to farm. We were dirty, starving, and hunted. Sometimes we were met with compassion. One Polish farmer's wife bravely gave us bread and water, crossing herself and muttering that God be with us. Other times we faced hostility. Another time a man warned us that if we didn't leave at once, he'd report us for a reward. We constantly feared discovery by German patrols or local collaborators. It was as if the entire world was a prison now, but nothing could compare to Sobibor. At least now we had a fighting chance. Over the following months, our small group managed to survive. We built makeshift shelters in the woods and foraged what we could. The winter was brutal. 2 of our group did not live to see the spring, succumbing to illness and exposure. But I endured, fueled by the memory of that promise to tell our story, and by the memory of David and all those we lost. Finally, in July 1944, the area was liberated by the advancing Soviet army. I was skeletal and weak by then, but I was alive, one of the very few from Sobibor who lived to see the Nazis defeated. In the aftermath, we learned the full impact of our daring revolt. On October 14, 1943, approximately 300 of the 600 prisoners in Sobibor had escaped into the forest during our uprising. Many were gunned down in the minefield and manhunt that followed. Others were captured in subsequent days. Ultimately, only about 50 survivors from the escape lived through the war. I later discovered that of those who stayed behind or couldn't escape, none survived. The SS murdered all remaining prisoners the very next day in retaliation. They also demolished the camp soon after, bulldozing it to hide all traces of their crimes. Sobibor was wiped off the map, but not from our memory. Our uprising put a scar on the Nazis' perfect machine of death. We prisoners had killed 11 SS officers and guards in Sobibor, a staggering blow against our captors, and we shattered the illusion of Jewish passivity. Without that revolt, Sobibor would have left virtually no survivors to testify of its horrors. As one historian noted, without the uprising in Sobibor, there would have been no survivors who witnessed the mass murder there. I share this story now, as an old man far removed from those desperate days, because I gave my word that I would let the world know what happened at Sobibor. I speak for David, for my wife and daughters, for Leon and Sasha, and all the brave souls of Sobibor, those who lived and those who died. We fought back against annihilation with nothing but our courage and the will to be free. We proved that even in history's darkest abyss of cruelty, there was resistance and there was hope. I can still smell the pine of the forest on that night of escape, mingled with the smoke of tragedy behind us. The horror we endured can never be erased, but neither can the heroism of that October day in 1943. We were prisoners, yes, but in the end, we refused to go quietly to our deaths. In our final act at Sobibor, drenched in horror yet blazing with hope, we reclaimed our dignity. This was our story, and I have lived to tell it, so the world will never forget. Never forget Sobibor.